everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea Podcast. We spin the jams and spill the tea. We're coming at you with a brand new Now episode this week where we talk about music and news and movies and shows and all kinds of bullshit. Woo!
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the greatest intros, I think, of all time in any context ever. Jesus Christ, you really laid it out. We have a really cool discussion topic up for discussion today. I just see discussion twice in the same sentence because I'm cool like that and totally not coasting on 3 hours of sleep. But we're going to be talking about the best ever comeback albums. And when we say comeback albums, we mean a very specific type of comeback album, and we'll outline that a little bit more when the time comes. But stick around for that later in the episode. Until then, we're going to talk about new music. We're going to talk about news in the world of music, and we're going to talk about what we've been listening to. It's just me and Jake for this one today, but all that means is that we're going to be fucking just firing off quick, no fucking around, just in the zone, just getting there, just come on, because I'm a little bit self-conscious, a little bit because of Morgan's apt observation that his presence so often kind of, it really enlivens the comedy in those videos. I'm like, he's right,
And he's right.
It doesn't have to be that way. We can riff,
Yeah,
we can joke,
we have fun.
We can fucking. But so, okay, let's kick it off with, we're going to talk about some new music that we've been enjoying eventually, but I just want to shout out a couple of new remixes that have kind of been, that we think are noteworthy, but also that, one of these has gone way under the radar. Beyonce dropped a remix of America Has a Problem, one of the highlights on the back half of Renaissance, with Kendrick Lamar on the track. And I felt like the whole internet just completely collectively ignored this for whatever reason. I know that, not everyone's been on board with Kendrick's more sort of insular directions with his most recent project, but this was hype as fuck. I loved this remix. I thought that the two played off each other really, really well. I thought Kendrick brought a lot of character to the track. He had that one amusing bar about how kind of even AI has to like practice. Kendrick like a great, which lyric genius informs me, is also a double entendre about Allen Iverson refusing to practice, some basketball reference. Anyway, Kendrick's bringing the heat. The track is great. The track is just, it has all of the same energy and pop that the original has. It's not all that different apart from Kendrick's addition to it. What did you think though, Jake?
I think he rides this effortlessly. Kendrick has never been one to slack on the vast majority of his features. The only reason I even knew it happened was because we have Cole, the biggest Beyonce fan maybe on earth, to have told me this. Otherwise, I would have just been finding this out now. So then when I went to check it out, I was like, oh, damn. All right, cool. And like, it just adds to this sort of trend of, I guess, the economy of the remix now, which is a very different kind of model now that I think that streaming is, the dominant way that we all consume music now. And it feels like a great excuse to add something substantive to an original song. And I like that idea in theory, and I hope more people take advantage of it fully the way that she does, by getting people like Kendrick, high profile, talented artists, to come and contribute something like really meaningful, to not even recontextualize the song, just add some spice or flavor to it. So yeah, big fan, good stuff.
The remix, I think, has increasingly become a kind of core part of essentially relaunching music to success, right? Like a lot of the big artists didn't achieve the level of success they wanted with an original single, will go the remix route nowadays. We'll get a featured artist on the track. The remix will kind of take over and be, as far as the audience is concerned, the official version of the song. That's becoming a more and more increasingly popular trend, especially in the era where, songs and tracks and music in that format is so kind of, separated out and consumed so much in a vacuum, apart from the context of original versions or album versions or anything like that. So yeah, but Beyonce, it's interesting Beyonce doing this, because she's kind of it's been a long time since Beyonce's really been showing any interest in, sort of commercial radio success. She's basically she's not marketed her certainly not her most recent album. She didn't market it in any of the conventional ways that an artist of her stature typically would. So she's kind of fully in her own zone, not really interested in making concessions. So any remixes that Beyonce do, that comes purely from a desire for Beyonce to get someone else on the track. I remember when she herself was on the remix to Megan Thee Stallion's song. Was it Savage? I think that was Savage.
Yeah, Savage remix.
And I remember that being like a real highlight because that was at a time where we were
best song on that album by far.
Yeah, and we were really starved for, I think, new Beyonce at that point in time as well. So hearing her come through some clips like that was really memorable. So yeah, no, I thought this remix was great as well. I thought Kendrick brought a great energy. He has some silly bars as well, as Kendrick is often known to do.
I really like that, honestly, because we kind of talked about this when we talked about Kendrick a couple times last year, is that he's put into this light in modern music where he's like this capital S serious artist. And I feel like he's really just done nothing but push back against that label ever since people started, blog writers got really up his ass back when To Pimp a Butterfly came out. And now whenever he can do some silly, irreverent shit, he just does it. And I think that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty fond of the line, "My horoscope said I'm really out my noodle. I'm troubling. I'm puzzling. It's Sudoku." He just... so that was a great remix. We also had a remix drop this week that was from Taylor Swift, who I think has announced a new version of Midnights, her most recent album. We already had the original album, we had the 3 a.m. edition, and now we've got... I don't know, the Twilight. I don't know what it is. It's some kind of new version of
Super Deluxe AAA edition.
Till Dawn edition. That's right. So yeah, okay. So we had 3 edition.
There you go.
Now we're going Till Dawn. I'm looking forward to the breakfast edition next year.
Hungover at Denny's edition.
Anyway, this edition comes, of course, with new versions of songs on the original album. We had a new version of the Lana Del Rey collaboration, Snow on the Beach, which I think the thing that fans were most upset about with the original version of that song was just that Lana wasn't on it enough. And so with more Lana, Snow on the Beach 2, Snow Harder. Yeah, Snow on the Beach 2, Snow limit to the amount of Lana on this song. But more interestingly, or I guess more potently, because that was kind of whatever, we had a remix of Karma, one of the highlights of Midnights, with Miss Ice Spice on the track. And I wanted to highlight this, first of all, obviously to talk about the remix, although there's not much to say. It's Karma and there's Ice Spice. The thing about Karma is Taylor's basically going through a whole bunch of like little exercises illustrating how karma brings her satisfaction and why karma is an important part of her life in terms of like learning to be peaceful and not kind of start beef and just know that people who kind of cross her will sort of get what they deserve. And she riffs on that idea throughout that song, and Ice Spice comes on the remix and riffs on it a little bit more as well. It's whatever. I mean, what do you think, Jake?
This has less to do with the song itself and more just Ice Spice, in that she is a figure that I am desperately trying to love, because I love her image and her, like, what she stands for, and I love how much she pisses people off. Like, everybody who hates Ice Spice, you've all fallen into a trap. Like, this is what they all wanted you to do. Like, everybody talking about Boy's a Liar and how like bad that song was, and I'm just like, you all are so easy to fool. But then I listen to her actual music and it just doesn't do anything for me. Like,
Jake, you're not a fan of much?
She's talented and funny, but I really feel like she just sort of struggles to translate these qualities into something that I enjoy listening to at all. Like, by all means, do whatever you want. Like, I love the fact that artists who, like, literally overnight, I feel like months ago, back when Ice Spice was like first a thing, like everybody started talking about her as though she had existed for years. And I was just like, fucking Who? When? Where? What? She's got a fucking song with 100 million streams. I have no clue where she came from. And I love that she incites so much passion in people. But at the same time, I'm just like, I have to wonder. It's not that I wonder why. I'm just sort of curious as to what other people like. I guess that I've seen some people say that they just sort of enjoy that she makes kind of laid back and more kind of irreverent music, and I get the appeal of that. It's just not very stimulating.
So I kind of approached the Ice Spice thing in a similar position to you at the beginning of the year, being like Ice Spice was suddenly a thing, and it all its genesis was all on TikTok, as these things often are, and that maybe is the best explainer for why you and I, didn't really see this coming because we're not hugely active TikTok users. But I was curious about Ice Spice. I wanted to kind of immerse myself in the story of Ice Spice and try and figure out, okay, what's the deal here, essentially. And I had suspicions that maybe a lot of it came from people memeing around Ice Spice initially, like the way that she presents herself in combination with the very monotone
Yeah.
style of performance that she has. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Like that's kind of the way that she performs. And so initially I was kind of very dismissive as well. I remember listening
Drake on Zoloft flow.
I remember listening to her, like, because her most infamous song is Munch, right? Which is just this song that if you go on the YouTube video for the song and you look in the comments, it is
Yeah.
just, it is this, it's not even like, I'm losing faith in humanity, because it's actually quite funny how hard people are riffing on how bad they think the song is and how zero energy of a performer they feel Ice Spice is. To the extent that I think that song is overhated, although I don't think it's a good song. That said, the Boys a Liar remix, which incidentally is a Pink Pantheress song, and I love that Pink Pantheress song, and I think that Pink Pantheress is a really creative and
Yeah.
artist in her own right, who we probably haven't talked about enough on the show. But the Boys a Liar remix is great. Like, this was the moment where I got it, because I think Ice Spice fits so well onto that song. Her particular style melds in with the beat really, really well. It's just one of my favorite beats of the year, frankly. It's one of my favorite songs of the year, if I could be like a little bit, whoa, wild, and just say that I think that song has really stuck with me in a positive way. So I'm always I'm rooting for Miss Spice. I'm rooting for her to go far, and I'm rooting for her to realize some creative potential that I think that she definitely has. But it's hard to separate her from the meme that she kind of and so that's the biggest failure, I think, of Ice Spice on the Karma remix, is that she's neither enjoyable for who she is, nor is she enjoyable as a meme on the song. Like, those two ways in which she works for me, neither of them really land on the Karma remix. She's just kind of just doing more of what Taylor's doing, except because it's Taylor's whole shtick and not Ice Spice's shtick. It just feels kind of like a mismatch. So it's a bit of a missed opportunity, I think. Although that said, I don't know what a good Taylor Swift Ice Spice collaboration would look like, because to me they're so fundamentally opposed, and a lot of what makes them interesting artists.
To me, it showcases less a blend of a kind of artistic synergy and more of just a really savvy move on Taylor's part. Like, let's call it what it is. It's a smart business decision more than it is a good song.
Yeah, it is on one level for sure, and it starts a conversation. But I also I'm always kind of amused by how, this is the thing, I like Taylor, I like a lot of her music, but at the same time, when I don't like something that she does, or when I think that something she does is kind of poorly conceived, it just always kind of makes me laugh. And this is the thing, is I think one of Taylor's weaknesses is that she's never really been all that great at picking featured artists, at least not in her era. Like, you think about all of the Taylor Swift featured artists, like, it doesn't even matter how good how much I like the artist in and of themselves, they never really feel like they belong on a Taylor song. And I'm sure as I say this, there are exceptions to that. But it's hard not to think of even Kendrick on Bad Blood being such a mismatch.
Ed Sheeran,
Brendan Urie on Me, like all of these features have been so distinctive parts of Taylor Swift's album rollouts have almost unanimously been real mismatches for her. I mean, there's the counterpoint, I suppose, would be Bon Iver on Exile, which is a great collaboration duet song. But, those things are kind of the exceptions that prove the rule with Taylor. So
Yeah, yeah.
I would love to see her take her canny business smarts in terms of these team ups and be able to find a way to match those with her artistic strengths as well. I don't feel like she has done that very successfully in recent years, even as she's had other
I
success.
totally agree.
Unfortunately, we had a pretty colossal loss this week. We have been
Yeah.
having them fairly regularly. It's coming thick and fast. I mean, this is the nature of commenting on music news as well. As soon as you tune into the world, you start to realize, how devastatingly frequently these things happen. But we lost Tina Turner this week, at the age of 83. I mean, she lived a long and successful life. And what was interesting about going back and revisiting Tina's biggest hits and just refamiliarizing myself with Tina's story this week was that, and I take full, admission here that I didn't know this, but Tina was an OG. And I don't mean
Oh yeah.
Tina came out of the earliest period of rock and roll as we know it today. Tina came out of the 50s and 60s. Ike and Tina Turner were huge before a lot of the rock and roll that we tend to talk about when we talk about the early period of rock and roll. Now, Tina was a flagship artist in that early period. And, of course, she had loads of hits in the 60s and beyond. I mean, she most famously had her cover of Proud Mary as well, which is just astonishing and one of the most enduring classics of that era. But all the way through to her comeback in the 80s with Private Dancer, the album that had What's Love Got to Do with It on it. And that was, of course, one of the biggest songs of the 80s and cemented Tina's reputation as an enduring artist who essentially had these huge moments across vast swathes of modern popular rock music and soul music history. So Tina's presence has been enduring. She's been an incredible icon and someone who's represented so much in the landscape of popular music over that period as well. Her story is one that I don't know well, but that in coming to learn about, I am gobsmacked that we don't really talk about her more frequently. I wanted to give Private Dancer especially a little bit of a shout out as well. I did listen to it and just to see whether it would fit in with our best comeback albums discussion. And I don't love that album in full as much as I think I would need to put it in there, but I want to give it an honorable mention just in terms of what it did for Tina's career and how huge What's Love Got to Do with It is as a song. I mean, Tina will forever be a legend of 20th century popular music, and her loss is all of our losses. So yeah, big ups and respect to the Queen. If Tina's music means something to you, or if you have a particular recommendation for Tina's career that we should check out, let us know in the comments below as well. Just wanted to pay tribute to the lady. In other news, and news that is a little bit messier, and news that is a little bit lighter as well. So there's been rumors swirling all year, I would say, and even beyond that an Oasis reunion is impending. Oasis reunion is
They've got to stop modding.
So there's been rumors, and there's been whispers, and there have been things happening behind the scenes as well. There are promoters, there are publicists, the ground has kind of been set for an Oasis reunion of sorts. And the question that's kind of always been on my lips is, well, not just will that actually pan out, but what will it look like? What will an Oasis reunion look like given the nature of the hilarious and incessant feuding between Noel and Liam Gallagher? And true to form, the feuding has continued and it's gone gnarly, as it often does. Although, one thing that's worth noting is that the person who typically tends to be the more violent and, I guess, aggressive in opposing this, which is, of course, Noel, has softened in his language while talking about it. He hasn't been as aggressively against it as he has in the past. And the way in which
Mhm.
his language has changed, because there was a recent reunion that happened, not reunion, a recent interview that happened with Noel on the Talksport radio station, where he was asked about it, and he did say, you know, he typically did shifted the buck onto Liam and said, well, I put it out there, Liam should call me, because he's like forever going on about it. You thought by now he'd have some kind of plan. He won't speak to me, he's a coward. So, but that's very soft from Noel. You know what I mean? Just saying
Yeah, yeah.
it's on, you know, even he says at one point he's being a little bit disingenuous, which is like, considering some of the things Noel has said about Liam in the past, that's like, that might as well be a compliment.
Like
You know what I mean?
and like the last time that they were firing back at each other on Twitter, like I'm pretty sure one of their daughters got involved because of what one of them had to say about the, like it was really nasty stuff.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, and so this is what made this story interesting this week, is because Noel tends to be the more aggressive one, and Liam tends to be the pacifist. Liam tends to be the guys that,
Mhm.
come on, we need to get over this, and I can't even. He's usually the one who, you know, tries to kind of pave over all that stuff. But Liam was on the offensive this week. He he dredged up something and completely random that Noel said in like the mid 90s, when he was like, so Liam said, I don't wish AIDS on people, which is a callback to the Blur Oasis beef, and something that Noel said offhandedly in 1995. I don't know why he's bringing that up now. But anyway, Liam says, I don't wish AIDS on people. I turn up and play the music for the people of Manchester who have just had a terror attack, while you sit on your dingy sipping champagne, and you got the audacity to call me a coward. Sit down, you bellend. So Liam dredging up the past, dredging up, you know, and I think I understand where he's coming from as well. Noel calling him disingenuous, saying he needs to get his act together, while Liam's like, hey, here are
Mhm.
these things that you have failed to do, or here are these ways in which you've been callous in the past that show that, you know, I'm nowhere near the only one who's guilty in this way. It's this typical feuding stuff. You know, Liam repeatedly said that Noel hates Oasis fans and is full of shit, both of which things I think are pretty true, and not even necessarily
Yeah.
a bad thing.
I just think it's funny that we like now that this year we've started covering news topics, I feel like there have been several like identifiable artists that have existed omnipresent in our little segments here. Like ever since we covered Be Here Now earlier this year in one of our record clubs, it feels like Liam and Noel have been popping up in the news every so often. Like there's this cultural resurgence of it. And then last week we talk about the fact that there's a new Blur album on the way, and now there's talkings that there might be there might be an Oasis reunion. And we had Matty Healy earlier being like, stop modding with your brother. And then Matty Healy keeps showing up in the news. All of these threads, man, they're all connected. This is all part of the same. Hell, Ice Spice, Matty Healy, Taylor Swift, it's all part of the same image, man.
I mean, and this week also, Noel Gallagher called Maddie Healy a slack jawed fuckwit, in response to that comment about, you know, the stop Martin comment, and suggested
Yes.
that Maddie needs to. What did he say? He said that that Maddie needs to get over how shit his band is and split up. So, you know, that's probably pretty
Fight,
par for the
fight,
course
fight,
for
fight.
Noel. And I think Maddie would probably be pretty flattered with that response, all things considered. You know, the
Yeah.
thing is as well with Noel and Liam, and the nature of the Oasis reunion as well, is that Liam needs it far more than Noel does. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Noel's had a fairly successful solo career in his High Flying Birds project. I mean, those records have been fairly consistently reasonably well received. They haven't obviously done huge numbers commercially, but, you know, it's not like a huge jump back from where Oasis were in their dying days anyway. So, you know, they had an album. They're putting out an album. In fact, I think Noel is prepping an album for release. In fact, this coming week, Noel
Oh,
has
wow.
High Flying Birds album dropping, Council Skies as well. So, you know, that's probably, I think, part of where Noel might be coming from with the softening, is that he can use this as a way
Yeah.
of promoting his upcoming project. That probably is where he's coming from. Whereas Liam, I mean, bless him, he's perennially high and constantly replying to fans on Twitter and being barely intelligible in the process. And I fully support it if it means that we
Yeah,
don't have another BDI album, because boy, oh boy, do I not want that to happen. Yeah, it is interesting.
I
Like,
want one. I want to be able to talk about it on the show. Give it
well,
to me.
I mean, we could do a record club on different gear still speeding, but
Do
I
it.
I would
You won't.
I won't. No, you're right. I won't. I mean, this is the thing. The dynamic of Oasis is right. Unlike a lot of huge creative partnerships that are just two people, regardless of the nature of that relationship, whether related or not, is that you usually have some degree of like shared creative input. And I don't want to like downplay Liam too much. I mean, Liam was a great stage performer. Liam did write songs, in the same way that Ringo did. And Liam brought what Liam brought to Oasis, is fundamental. Oasis wouldn't be Oasis without him. Noel couldn't have performed the way that Liam does and made them as huge in that way. But if we're talking about the creative input, it's very strongly, it was Noel's band. So I think there's an understanding of that, and maybe each of them values their own contribution more than they value the other's contribution to the band because of
Probably.
how narcissistic they are. But I think they still understand that they would need each other. And I'm sure that not that creativity matters anyway, because this reunion would unquestionably not result in new music. It would just be
No.
but I could wish, we could live in hope. I would
Like
absolutely love.
like logistically, that's basically impossible. Like, I don't think they could stop arguing for long enough to get new music made, even if they both intended to do that.
No, you're right. I would love to be a fly on the wall at the sound checks. I would love to be
God.
fly on the wall in those situations. It'd be like that.
Have another Wibbling Rivalry bootleg single be released,
Yeah.
please. Oh God.
So yeah, that's Oasis reunion is pending. I mean, at the current stage, it's officially not happening, but we'll see what
Do you
happens. We'll see
see?
what
This is the thing. I feel like the Gallagher brothers don't realize that a significant swath of Oasis fans would show up to concerts, not even to hear them play music, just to hear them argue. I'd buy tickets. Are you kidding? Absolutely. I'd film that shit. I'd put that on YouTube. We'd become internet famous, man. Hell yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, the reason this even has a chance of happening is because there is a jumbo jet airliner worth of money in it for them. Like, they have been offered
I mean,
unholy
wow.
sums. And I think at the end of the day, all they'll need to do to kind of get it together will be to recontextualize all of this in the context of the fucking colossal quantities of money that there are to be made.
It would be like the Simon and Garfunkel tour after they split up, when they tried to reconcile, and like every single show was just a fucking nightmare and Paul Simon was just an asshole the whole time. I mean, it would be worse because they're them, but it would be analogous. That's all I'm saying.
So that's what's been happening lately in terms of news. A couple of new releases that we want to talk about. Jake, why don't you tell us if you've been listening to anything lately in terms of new releases that you want to shout out?
Well, I've got one new release that I want to shout out because it was put on my radar because a particular popular internet music critic reviewed it very favorably, and I had never heard of this band before, so naturally I took it upon myself to be a little curious and try it out. And that's the Lemon Twigs. That is their band name. Their newest album, Everything Harmony. And I was intrigued just because from the way said internet music critic described this music, it did not sound like anything that any music critic would be over the moon about, just because it's a very like a retro revival throwback that's very heavy on soft rock, folk pop, occasional flavorings of psychedelic pop that aren't too far away from, I mean, classic Beatles records, or I thought of the Zombies several times when I was listening to it. But the biggest point of comparison I came up with is pre Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks' Fleetwood Mac, specifically albums like Then Play On, for instance. It's got that very classic 60s and even kind of 70s vibe to it. It's blending a couple of different things together. There are kind of like glammier elements in their sort of more spirited rock cuts, but this is very tender, very willowy kind of songs. And honestly, I really enjoyed this. The songwriting is genuinely quite fantastic and a little bit more emotionally multifaceted than stuff like this that I'm used to. A lot of this retro revival stuff that we get these days, I always kind of I don't turn my nose up at it inherently, but I'm always a bit wary exploring this stuff just because of bands like Greta Van Fleet or something where it's just like they just add no sauce to the mix, and I'm just kind of like, I don't really get anything out of this. But these guys are great songwriters, and from what I can tell, they must be production whiz kids because not only does this have that fantastic weighty analog 60s sound. I mean, it sounds like I was listening to like the first Crosby, Stills and Nash album at times. That was probably the closest point for comparison I could think of. I mean, every song on here sounds like some variation of Helplessly Hoping. So if that kind of thing sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend this. They have more spirited cuts. I mean, In My Head is probably one of the catchiest songs to come out this entire year so far. There's very sweet stuff. The opener is really tender balladry, and I really like the rockier shit like What Happens to a Heart or Ghost Run Free. It's south of 50 minutes. It's paced pretty well. All of the songs are relatively solid. There's no huge weak points. Like, again, this is something that has a very specific line of appeal. Like, if this sounds interesting to you, you're probably going to get along with it. If anything I said makes you go like, oh, this kind of sounds a little lame, a little boomery, stay away because nothing here will convince you. But I can at least give them credit for a really well executed version of this little idea. And they bring enough verve, enough color, enough creativity to make it feel like it's actually worth listening to and not just going back to some canonical 60s or 70s classic Baroque pop album. So I enjoyed myself heavily with this one.
Yeah, I've heard good things about this, and I have listened to a couple of the singles off this album as well. I heard it way back when the album was getting a buzz initially when it first came out, and I really enjoyed those songs. So yeah, I'll definitely go back and listen to it in full. They're a band whose name I've just heard a lot of over the years, like they've just come up in conversations, and I've never really gotten into them. So it's nice to hear that they're doing this kind of like late 60s, early 70s throwback stuff and doing it really, really well. One new release I want to talk about that's been generating conversation in music Twitter circles. I guess more in the music Twitter circles of millennials who are old enough to remember living through the electro clash indie sleaze era of the mid 2000s. And while I was very young during that time, I was keenly aware of it as well because my dad was super into electronic music in the 2000s, and particularly the ways in which it intersected with pop music in the form of electroclash and new rave music. And I bring all this up in the context of a new band who have been generating conversation, controversy, and divisive opinions. The band is called The Deer, and it's a solo project
Oh,
of
yeah.
one Mr. Let me get this right, Harrison Patrick Smith. And in its aesthetic and its sound and everything that this project, every way in which this project is packaged, it is 100% a throwback to this mid 2000s electro clash scene where it was really bright buzzing synthesizers, really hard beats, really thick bass lines, really kind of sort of ethereal but sexual and sensual vocal performances, and really explicit and aggressively sexual lyrics, right? All this stuff that was so core to that era. Artists like, well, Peach is probably the most famous one, but also Felix the House Cat, Fisher Spooner, Tiger, even the one McLean to a certain extent. A lot of people bring up LCD Sound System, whose sound definitely was kind of adjacent to that, but really it's the specific niche of electro clash that the Deer are most obviously enamored with. And so they released their debut EP this week called The Six, which generated a lot of conversation. I mean, I was aware of them before this EP even dropped because of the singles Girls and Good Time, which, again, if you've ever heard any Electroclash, they don't even feel like new songs. They feel like they're taken right out of 2005. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. And the thing about this EP is that I have a certain degree of nostalgia for that era of music. And I just love a lot of the aesthetics of that style of electronic music, a lot of the intensity, a lot of the heft of it. The indie sleaze aspects of it, the hypersexuality of it is something I could take or leave, frankly, and was always something that was kind of uncomfortable for me as a kid to experience so much of. But that it was always so cartoonish. It was always so distance from reality that I was never really kind of warped or affected by it. It was just kind of funny. And a lot of it still is, a lot of it, especially bands like Fisher Spooner, if you go back and look at those songs, they're hilariously pretentious. They're so just completely up their own ass, but that's kind of the appeal of them. It's this whole sort of style, where it's a style over substance, 100%. And that's what the Deer's new EP is. It is style above substance completely. I mean, Girls it'll probably be the song they're always most known for. I can't imagine them having much longevity, but even then, making another song that better encapsulates what this whole thing is about. It's bratty, it's college broy, but in a kind of nerdy sort of incel-y sort of way. It's got its tongue firmly in cheek. It's got self-awareness about what it is. It's not, and this is the thing, I could understand people fucking hating this because the whole aesthetic of it and the personality and all that kind of thing, it's kind of reprehensible, but it's all a performance and I don't take offense at it, but it is vacuous in a way that a lot of the most easily forgotten and poorly aging music of the Electroclash era is. I'm not saying all of it's vacuous. I'm not saying all of it's aged poorly, but a lot of it has. And the Deer is specifically enamored with that just really into the red, really over the top stuff that we look back on now and just cringe. The EP is, it's a really tightly wound EP. It's 11 minutes. It's in and out. It's like a bullet. It's got some very sleek, very well produced and well oiled sounds. If the way I've described it doesn't appeal to you, you will hate it. Bare minimum. I like the idea of this coming back, not so much the hypersexuality, but just the kind of aesthetic of electronic music coming back in this way. I would just like to see a lot more done with it. I would like to see it developed into something that feels like it belongs in the current era, as opposed to just being a very shallow throwback. Even though it is a throwback of a very shallow style, it's one joke, basically, and you get it in seconds, and there's really not much else to it. And a lot of records and singles that came out in that era that I have fond memories of that are widely kind of disparaged now do it, I think, with a little bit more grit than this. So look, it's interesting as a curio. It's obviously something that is designed to start conversations and to get people riled up and get, to offend the Puritans as well. And there are a lot of puritanical people who are doing real Helen Lovejoy's "Well, won't anyone think of the children" when they look at this, and that's very over the top and ridiculous. It's inoffensive to me. It's silly, but also at the end of the day, it doesn't do much to substantiate itself or distinguish itself, and it won't have much staying power. So it was interesting for me to be reminded of that era and to kind of throw back a little bit and go back and listen to some of those old songs. But then the music itself here, it's good for one listen, maybe, and a bit of a chuckle, but it's not gonna, people aren't gonna remember this very far from now. It's very much this year's slut pop, if I'm to make another contemporary comparison.
Oh no,
it doesn't. It's not reprehensible in the way that is, which is a thing I hate for very specific reasons. But it's it's a throwback in the same sense that is, and it's enamored with this idea of just being so over the top about itself. But at the end of the day, if I switch my brain off, it's sleek, it's solid, it bangs a little bit, it's okay. But I am interested in hearing what other people have to say about it, particularly if you've also been remember or are familiar with that era of 2000s electronic music and how you feel about it making a comeback. So that's all we have for brand new releases. Jake, do you have any other non-new release music you've been listening to that you want to shout out on the show today?
I do. First of which is an album that was actually recommended to us a couple of days ago now, by a commenter on one of our videos. It's talking about an album from a band called The White Noise, their first album, An Electric Storm. Specifically, this was in reference to like just the history of electronic music, and this user enthusiastically described this album as being quite mind-blowing and like one of the first sort of premier electronic music albums. It came out in 1969. And I took a listen to this. It was 35 minutes, so I was like, all right, I'll give this a shot. And I, I hate that I do have to qualify it with, for 1969, but if I didn't know that this album came out in the 60s, I would assume that this was like a late 90s Negative Land style, like intentional stylistic throwback to combining like plunderphonics and traditional Velvet Underground style pop and rock music. It's a really fascinating record and a really adventurous one too. There are moments of like this is the earliest at least that I've listened to with records that I could say that something takes elements of sound collage, drone, and electronic music, and it creates something that is totally overstimulating and overwhelming. Songs like Here Come the Fleas or My Game of Loving is just like it has moments where you're just like, whoa, that's a lot going on. But then there are also, more traditionally stripped back moments that just kind of have a more electronic aesthetic, like the opener Love Without Sound. But then there are really adventurous moments like the 11-minute long piece, The Visitation, or the final track, Black Mass Electric Storm in Hell, where things get real fucking weird. And I was kind of taken aback with how immersive I found the overall experience to be. It is a bit rudimentary in some respects, and I guess the context did help me gel with it a little bit more overall. But for just being an album that's this old, playing with all of these ideas, I can't imagine this was a hugely popular album in its time. I'm guessing it's probably been rediscovered and reevaluated by people now, but this must have been like how people felt when they first listened to the Beatles' Revolver and they start listening to those songs with all those heavy tape effects.
Yeah, I thought of Tomorrow Never Knows while you were talking about it.
Yeah, that's basically like it's basically an album full of Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles, and it's a little bit more, again, heavily synthesized, but it's never to the point where it feels angular or jagged. It's always very skillfully employed. You can hear the limitations of the technology, but at the same time I don't feel like the limitations necessarily hold it back from being cool. It's definitely an album I would go back to. It's more than just a novelty and more than just an album that was an exciting like breakthrough in electronic music. I'd highly recommend this to anyone who this even sounds vaguely interesting to. Again, if you find a lot of novelty out of bands like Negative Land, for instance, this is like the inception for all of that, but I still feel like there's maybe a little bit more meat on this project's bones than something like that. So if the one dimensionality of some of that stuff kind of puts you off, I'd still recommend this. I mean, this is like the digital version of the Velvet Underground's White Light, White Heat. Not quite as avant-garde, maybe, but certainly comparable, I would say, in a number of respects.
I haven't heard this particular album, but I am. It's nice to hear Delia Derbyshire come up in some context as well. I need to hear this. She's one of the most influential figures in electronic music. She famously arranged the very iconic electronic version of the Doctor Who theme that came out in the 1960s.
Oh,
Iconic. I would say maybe the first like iconic piece of electronic music ever.
huh.
Even if it was obviously a time where a lot of different individuals, too many to name, were having a huge influence on the development of what that would become to be as the technology was being created. But Delia Derbyshire has been hugely influential on a number of my favorite artists growing up, like Chemical Brothers and Orbital. And she's just, her footprint on the nature of electronic music, particularly in the UK, is so vast. So I really need to hear this, because I didn't know that she had a band, and I didn't know that they released an album at this particular juncture that sounds like it's really honing a lot of what I like about Delia's footprint in general in her compositions. I would also say as well, Jake, if you've ever heard of a band called the Silver Apples, I'd recommend you check them out as well. They're a very early pioneer of like psychedelic music through the electronic lens, using things like tape loops and using things like obviously using analog technology, but really kind of pushing the envelope forward. They put out an album in 1968 that's generally regarded as one of the kind of most ground zero, sort of groundbreaking records in the development of early electronic music. So I would recommend checking that out. And thank you to the commenter on our Daft Punk video who put this on our radar, this White Noise album. It seems brilliant. I didn't know it existed. I'm very excited to listen to it. I'm sorry I haven't had the chance yet. But as always, we really appreciate these comments that give us these recommendations that make us aware of these things, because a lot of the time in our sort of insular community, we don't necessarily get that sort of input. We aren't always aware of these sorts of things. So it's really appreciated.
The other thing that has dominated, honestly, I'm being a bit overly generous to myself if I say this was probably about half of my music listening this week. This is probably more like 3/4 of my music listening this week, is that I've found a new band to hyperfixate on. This keeps happening to me this year, and I keep finding bands at an alarming rate, and it keeps making me skip over bands that I find previously, and I'm like, no, I need to stop doing this. I need to hold myself back, but I just can't help it sometimes. But this is a band that I'm once again shocked I didn't get into sooner, considering they are popular both generally and in online spaces, and they are one of this podcast's favorite very specific musical subgenres, that being Scottish folk music, which honestly is a little bit more accessible than I make it sound, I guess. When you think like Scottish folk music, you probably think of like old shit from like the 1900s that are, dug up from like
it's Scottish indie folk, which I think is a distinct thing from Scottish folk.
Yeah. I guess it's a bit more ubiquitous than that even sounds. But I mean, the band in question is Belle and Sebastian. I mean, to say that they're just that is a bit disingenuous too. They also have elements of chamber pop and twee pop or jangle pop, just, a sound that is a bit more full than I guess I was probably anticipating this being. But I took a listen to their first album, not their first album, the first album that I've heard from them, which is their second record, which is 1996's If You're Feeling Sinister. This is one of
classic.
Notably, this is a Ryley 10 out of 10 album, one of the few albums we've given a perfect score to that I haven't heard it up until now, so this has been on my list forever. And I mean, most of my mutuals think this album is a masterpiece, not to mention. So I turned this on. I had some pretty lofty expectations. And yep, this is the third 10 out of 10 that I've given this year. I am obsessed with this album for so many reasons. And I'm going to do things like, this is an album where I was absolutely thrilled to learn that there is a Pitchfork documentary on the making of this album that I'm absolutely going to listen to, because again, I am obsessed with it. I would compare it very heavily, at least in sound, to, I guess, maybe a little bit more like a slightly less pop inclined version of something like the Smiths. That was maybe the biggest point for comparison that I kept thinking about. But when it comes to like the songwriting sensibilities and the storytelling on here, I was frequently reminded of John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats. Very singular, specific character portraits that feel very much in keeping with this particular artist. There's lots of different recurring elements that show up on here, like take a drink or a shot every time a female character on this album is secretly like it has a weird dark kinky side, and you'll probably be dead of alcohol poisoning by the time the album is over. It's a very youthful, like kind of teenage record thematically speaking, but it's also written with this very careful, almost precision. Like I've been obsessed with it's not I don't even think it's my favorite song on here. I mean, it's certainly up there, but the opener on here, The Stars of Track and Field, I've been obsessed with this fucking song. I haven't been able to stop listening to it, and it's just because it's so fascinating. And then when you learn that there's a little bit more of a personal aspect into this song, in that the lead singer, and I believe just the main lyricist of the band, Stuart Murdoch, was somebody who did run track and field in high school, but like couldn't because he was diagnosed with some kind of exhaustion disorder or something and couldn't actually like play sports that frequently. And that sort of ties into some elements of the song, but also there's kind of a wish fulfillment element. But the way that the song frames itself, the wish fulfillment doesn't actually end up fulfilling anyone, and it takes on a character in and of itself that's like totally separate from its intended purpose, and it ends up being way more interesting than I initially thought that it was. And initially it's this very well arranged, amazingly like tightly put together song, but the moment you start to dissect any of these songs lyrically, I don't want to say, I mean, like, I could say that it's Dylan-esque. There isn't a direct reference to Bob Dylan on this album, but there's something deeper going on here with all of the songs, and that once you interrogate them, there's something to be said about every character, every story, and not just that, but it makes you, it's a very songwriterly album, I guess, and the context of the songwriter and the songwriter's subjects is very front and center, and it makes you pay attention to this fact, and that context makes the meaning of every song hideously fucking sad. Like there's so many songs on here that sound jaunty, spry, upbeat, like a Get Away From Here, I'm Dying is one of the more bright and upbeat points on the album, and then you pay attention to it lyrically and you just want to fucking go to the bathtub and end it all. There's also just moments on here like the ending song, Judy and the Dream of Horses, which is again a fantastic story in and of itself, but the lyrical journey that it goes on, by the end of it, you're just like, oh God, where's the fucking gun? I can't take it anymore. It manages to balance itself out by being amazingly arranged songs. Like there's so much going on here from an instrumental perspective. Like this is such a fantastic full band sound, and there are moments on here that are bizarrely ambitious. Like there's one song on here that has a recorder, and I had a callback to that moment where we talked about Pearl Jam's 10, and Morgan was like, how did you make a tambourine emotionally tangible? And for me, it's that, but with a recorder, because, you know, it's this traditionally kind of dinky sounding instrument, and when it pops up on here, you're just like, oh, fuck you, Stuart. Same thing with like there sometimes like the keyboards on here are mixed in a certain way that makes them sound like these instruments from another fucking world, but it never takes away from the core root of these very fundamentally satisfying jangle pop instrumentals. Like the guitar work on here is it's deceptively simplistic, but it's employed in a way that feels very thoughtful, and that's just the case for the whole album. Every single song on here is fucking masterful. I love all, like, If You're Feeling Sinister, the title track, this is like easily one of the best songs I've heard in a fucking eon. It also just sort of speaks to that part of me that, you know, this album deals very heavily with themes of like, you know, being a teenager, being very sexually repressed, and also like the proximity that you have to like particularly like being in like a Catholic primary school background I'm very familiar with. That's a theme that pops up on like basically half of these songs. And I feel like if you are familiar with the kind of things that this album is speaking about, you're like, God damn, this really feels like somebody saw into my head and then made an album about it. I cannot wait to listen to other releases from this band. Like, before this, they have their debut Tiger Milk. The Boy with the Arab Strap is an album that we've mentioned on here before. I hear Dear Catastrophe Waitress is a fantastic album. And some of their like later era stuff, like The Life Pursuit and Write About Love, I've seen say is particularly underrated. So I'm very excited to explore more from this band if I can finally tear myself away from this album, which remains to be seen.
Yeah, Belle and Sebastian, always a very important band to me as a teenager. And I feel like millions of people would probably echo that sentiment. They're one of those bands that, if you encounter them at that time, then it feels like music that's made just for you. And that album in particular, like always, I have wept to that album so much. Like I've just put that album on when I was 15 and 16 and feeling defeated by, and this is the thing, right, is it's a very tender album about coming to terms with the force of your mind and of your sexuality as it's coming into blossom. It's not an explicitly queer record, although I think it can be read through a queer lens, but it's
I,
really
I I'd
about,
say that the stars of track and field can be read to be pretty explicitly queer.
but the beauty of it is that it works as a microcosm for the awkwardness of burgeoning sexuality, no matter
Yeah.
what form that takes. And I always felt a very strong connection to the way in which that's intertwined deeply with education, and that records at school and
Hmm.
the school process, and particularly in a Catholic context as well, something that's very true. I mean, the idea of perversity and the idea of your sexuality and of your feelings being kind of this ugliness, this ugly scar, this tumor that you carry, in the
If you're
way that
feeling sinister, go off and see your minister.
yeah. Yeah, that song is my favorite one, for a number of reasons.
So good.
But yeah, no, Belle and Sebastian was a great band. Stuart Murdoch, an incredible songwriter. I mean, Tiger Milk and this album came out like I think 4 or 5 months apart in the same
Yeah,
year,
same year.
and it was yeah, they're one of the most incredible just incredible starts to a career ever, really. I mean, I think Stuart wrote most of these songs when he was in college, and just the project exploded so quickly as well. I mean, If You're Feeling Sinister was one of the earliest like triumphs of like the blog scene, in terms of like an album and a band suddenly thrust into success purely through blogs, essentially, and internet journals picking up on them, and saying basically this is one of the greatest bands ever, or this is the greatest thing we've ever heard, and essentially thrusting them to success through through those means. But yeah, check out the Pitchfork documentary for sure. I mean, they have a few. There was a period like long gone now because they've been bought out by Condé Nast, and they've changed in so many dramatic ways. But there was a period, like 10 years ago, where Pitchfork were making loads of documentaries. They have one for Slow Dive
Hmm.
Souvlaki. They have one for
Oh,
Modest Mouse's Lonesome Crowded West. They have one for
yeah.
Frank Soft Bulletin. They've got a few that they made, and they're very like impeccably well made, and obviously the product of a sizable budget as well. So those are 100% worth checking out. But yeah, I've always loved Belle and Sebastian. I you've very much inspired me now to want to go back and finish off the records of theirs that I haven't heard, and remind myself why why I love them so much. Alrighty, let's get into our discussion topic for today, for this week's Now episode, which is our favorite comeback albums. Now, I've set some fairly specific criteria for this as well. The nature of a comeback, it has different forms. It comes in different contexts, and the narrative of an artist that leads up to that point obviously can be very varied, and can encompass a lot of different stories and a lot of different kind of rises, falls, and all kinds of different things. But specifically for this topic, I wanted to focus on albums that came out at a point in an artist's trajectory where basically a record this good was not expected of them. They had to be big artists who were beloved and had great classic albums under their belt, but were basically at a stage of their career where they had essentially wandered into some places that a lot of people were maybe not all that interested in following, and maybe it resulted in some records that people essentially attributed to the band having lost that spark, essentially, that made their great records or their great era great. And these are examples of albums that came along after a period of time where the band had been viewed in that way, that essentially dispelled those feelings and confidently reasserted the artist with a great record that fully established them as good as they ever had been, basically. You know, it's the ultimate sort of feel good story, basically, where a great band or great artist that has a really rough period where people essentially think, well, they've passed it, you know, they've finished their classic era, come back and deliver something of quality that is just as good as their classic records in many respects. So Jake and I each have 3 picks that satisfy these criteria. Jake, why don't you kick off with your first pick for best comeback albums?
I also feel like it's important to contextualize that this sort of status as a comeback album is a bit more reliant on general audience consensus than it is our personal opinions. Because, as a matter of fact, I'll demonstrate that with my first pick here. Because my first pick here, I wanted to pick because I genuinely believe that it is a great comeback album. It fits the criteria, and because I knew it would be controversial. And I love, in particular, that Ryley is wearing their Reanimator shirt today, because it is, in fact, the album that we reviewed alongside Reanimator the first year we did this podcast. Because my first pick is the Flaming Lips album, American Head. Now, curiously enough, all 3 of my picks are albums that I have talked about in some capacity on this show, but they were all 3 good albums that that just felt a bit too perfect for this very, very specific kind of topic. And at this point in the Flaming Lips career, this was released in 2020, and I don't really think anybody saw this coming, because you could reasonably argue that American Head is the album that, like, the best album that they had made since probably 2002 with Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, another album that we've talked about on this show. But like, after Yoshimi, there were a bunch of records that came after it that I feel like just kind of failed to live up to what that album did. And I understand that, just because that is such a great refinement of the Flaming Lips' psychedelic pop kind of out there aesthetic, that it's going to be hard to follow that up. But I mean, you have albums that are seen as, you know, very good, stuff like At War with the Mystics, The Terror, an album that we've talked about on this show, which I feel like is certainly an album that I love a lot, but that's not a record that people tend to think is one of their better albums. It might have been the one that people like the most in this. Embryonic, I know, was an album that people did like, you know, in 2009. So I think that that's probably the best point at which you can argue was their last great album before this at this point. But even then, that was still kind of a divisive, long, indulgent, and kind of out there record for the Lips. So it's not exactly a pick that everybody was fully on board with and that satisfied, you know, all Lips fans. And it's weird, just because the Flaming Lips are such an amorphous band to begin with, that it's sort of like, what are you even expected to do at this point? And I wanted to shout out American Head in particular, not just because I think it's a great album, and not just because I think it's, it fits into this, but because I like this album even more than when we reviewed it, and I was easily its biggest defender when we were talking about it. I love this record. It's not a particularly unique album, and I kind of see why it was seen as a return to form for the Lips, is because it's not taking any risks as a record. It's not doing anything that other Lips albums haven't done. That said, it gets by on the strength of the songs alone. I think that stuff like the opener, Will You Return When You Come Down, is one of the most beautiful songs that they've ever made. I love this song. It's
I
easily one
agree.
of the most like directly dream pop inclined songs that the Lips have ever released. And hell, I think that vibe continues into the following track, Watching the Light Bugs Glow. And there are just lots of traditionally very likable, very atmospheric songs on here, like Dinosaurs on the Mountain, At the Movies on Quaaludes, Mother I've Taken to LSD, one of the greatest song titles ever. And this sort of gradual exploration of the nostalgia of Wayne Coyne's childhood mines some really interesting lyrical moments that feel a bit more emotionally direct than Lips albums tend to feel. Like even with something like Yoshimi, which is a very dark record that has a lot of very heavy themes. That's an album that really, no matter how you view it, no matter what your theory about the story of the album is, it's about death. It's about dying and coming to terms with dying. And this album is very much about exploring the darker underside of childhood. You sort of get that first part of the album that kind of lures you in with all of the nostalgic imagery, and then it does the David Lynch Blue Velvet panning shot where it shows you the kind of seedy underbelly of everything after that: drugs, violence, police, all that kind of stuff, growing distant from your family members, and having family members die even, and there are just plenty of moments on here that I find tender and charming. Mother Please Don't Be Sad, I think, is a pretty effective ballad.
Great song.
I really love the song God and the Policeman, which has maybe one of the more anonymous Casey Musgraves features that exist in the world, but she's still pleasant on the
So
song.
anonymous that I misremembered that as being Lana Del Rey and not Casey Musgraves.
If her name was taken off of the song, I would absolutely believe it's Lana Del Rey, like 100%, like real snow on the beach moment, honestly. And I also do think My Religion Is You is a particularly underrated Lips closer. This is very much not an album that does anything different or unique, but it does something that it occupies a space that great comeback albums should occupy, and that after a period of a band experimenting, going off the beaten path, doing lots of stuff that maybe proves to be a bit more divisive, coming back to their roots, their origins, and reassuring their fan base that they can still do what lured those fans to be there in the first place, and they can just sort of reassert themselves and be like, hey, we've still got it. We can still make the kind of music that you all still love us for. We're not just going to go off and just continuously do all these wild experiments. For as much as we value and respect and often engage with artists doing willfully antagonistic and experimental things, I think it's kind of inarguable that the Lips at this point in their career needed to make an album like this, because that previous decade, no matter how you view those albums, like, again, The Terror is my favorite Flaming Lips album. That's not a record that's an easy sell. Like, that album it's like the darkest thing they've ever made. It's reliant on minimal like drone music and shit, and it's just like, if you're a fan of Yoshimi, there's no guarantee that you'll be a fan of something like that. And they do all of these weird experiments. They do albums like Oxy Melody, albums that just aren't received well. They just needed to come back, and they needed to say, yeah, let's just kind of play to our strengths a little bit more this time. And I feel like that they did that about as effectively as they could.
Yeah, I mean, the Flaming Lips are one of those bands that, I mean, I've heard every single one of their albums. I went through their entire discography as a teenager. I completely inhaled all of their music. They've always meant a lot to me. You can never count them out. They have a lot
Nope.
of underwhelming music. They have a lot of music that doesn't quite deliver, but they have no music that doesn't thoroughly imbue their weird, quirky personality. And American Head was, even though I didn't love that record as much as you, I'm curious whether or not it would grow on me with a revisit. There's every potential it could. That was still a record that I think cohered a lot of the strengths of those quirky idiosyncrasies better than anything they had done in a long time. And you're right, The Terror is an amazing album. I'm very proud of the video we made on that, but it's kind of an outlier. It doesn't really feel like a Flaming Lips album in a lot of respects. It has certain aesthetics that do make it recognizably them, but it's so dark, it's so upsetting, it's so dour, it's so just completely consumed by itself that it doesn't have that, because the defining factor of so much of Flaming Lips music to me is a sense of fun, a sense of color, a sense of liveliness, a sense of extremeness. And The Terror doesn't really have that. I think Embryonic, which is a record I happen to just be thinking about a lot this week, I need to revisit that next chance I get, is kind of the last hurrah of the Flaming Lips in that kind of purely expressive mode. And American Head felt like it was the first time they were really, attempting something. And it doesn't have that level of ambition, but certainly that has that level of like coherence, I suppose.
Something definitive.
Well, my first pick today is one of the most celebrated comeback albums of all time, I think. A record that was critically acclaimed, a record that fans of this band just completely rapturously received, and that also marked a kind of definitive ending in a very bittersweet sort of way. And that's A Tribe Called Quest's album, We Got It From Here, Thank You For Your Service. I mean, I remember so
Amazing
vividly.
pick.
Yeah, I remember so vividly when this came out in 2016. I remember the surprise of the release of this. I remember, as a person who had gotten into Tribe Called Quest fairly quickly in my kind of like, dabbling in the world of classic hip hop phase as a teenager, I remember kind of basically thinking that they were officially sort of gone forever. I hadn't really thought about the possibility of a new Tribe Called Quest album. It was just not something I'd ever really entertained. As much as I loved Midnight Marauders and as much as I loved Low End Theory at that time, like it was just something that never felt real. But then it just happened. One day it was just here. I don't remember if there was build up to it. I think there might have been a single, but I just remember being completely gobsmacked and just blindsided by it, especially coming back to it and realizing that, not only is this an amazing comeback album after a period of inactivity that was preceded by some pretty underwhelming records, it's also their best album. Like, this is
damn fucking right it is. Yes.
This is a band that came through with 3 back-to-back classics from the gate, in the same way that De La Soul did. It was a huge time for alternative hip hop in the early 90s, this particular vision of what hip hop could be outside of the encroaching hugeness of gangster rap. And what Tribe Called Quest did with their comeback album is channel all those aesthetics, channel all those feelings into something that felt inescapably modern and urgent. I mean, this is one of the most definitive albums of 2016 for me. I mean, it's no coincidence that the album came out days after the the US presidential election of 2016 as well. It felt like something that, whether intentionally or not, was capitalizing on the feelings of that moment in really just intense ways, but also not in ways that felt like they were oversaturated or like, excessive. And because there was already the sense of nauseating, like, the last thing we need is more of this in our pop culture, right? But the way that Tribe handled the current moment with that album is so. I mean, the Space Program, first song on that album, I think, is one of the greatest songs that they ever made. Maybe my favorite Tribe song, frankly. It's really hard to say, but it's
one of the best songs out of one of the best years of music to ever happen, frankly. 100%. Like, if we made a top 10 songs of 2016, I think the Space Program would be on mine.
Oh, 100. It would absolutely be on mine. I mean, that song felt like, it just felt incredible to hear that at that time, to hear the urgency of Q-Tip and to hear the slickness and the perfectly polished sound that they had kind of refined. I mean, the features all over this album are incredible as well. Busta Rhymes on this record, Consequence on this record, Andre's on this record, Anderson .Paak,
Elton John
on this record. Yes, you had Elton John as well. I mean, and it was a double album as well. It was this kind of opulent sprawl. It had the feeling of a classic era hip hop record, but thoroughly updated for the current moment. I mean, it's hard when I think about what an amazing, like, gobsmackingly brilliant year for music 2016 was. You have to remember that it was already that before this even came out. Right? Like, it had already been a year of just incomparable, incomprehensible brilliance before the release of Tribe Called Quest's best album, a double record that also served as a fitting farewell and tribute to the recently departed Phife Dawg. It doesn't get much more life-affirming and beautiful than this. It doesn't get much truer to the joy of music and the joy of the musical collective than this as well. And it feels like every 90s hip-hop act making a comeback that has happened in the wake of this owes something to this, or owes some level of inspiration or some kind of channeled energy to what this record achieved. It's just a masterpiece, easily one of my picks today for best comeback albums.
I'm pretty sure this is my favorite hip hop album of 2016. And that's a year where you have Kaz Honor Killed the Samurai, Danny Brown's Atrocity Exhibition, fucking Kanye West, The Life of Pablo, Makami's HBO. Like, there are tons of great canonized underground and mainstream hip hop releases this year that people will be celebrating 10 years from now. And I still think this is the most impressive out of all of them.
I mean, this was the year of Denzel Curry's Imperial. It was the year of Aesop Rock's The Impossible Kid. It was the year of West Side Gun's Fly God. It was the year of so many great hip hop records. It's kind
God,
of
Atrocity Exhibition, Impossible Kid, and We Got It From Here in one. That might be my favorite, like, 3 albums out of a given year in like the history of hip hop, frankly. Like, that's Jake core right there.
Yeah. I mean, Jake, what is your second pick today?
All right, my second pick here is something that, again, I have mentioned in a video in the past, because it is a album from one of my favorite bands, one of my favorite, I guess, a band that's not just technically rock music, but is from the world of classic rock, that being Black Sabbath, heavy metal pioneers, Black Sabbath. And if you've seen my tier list video on them, which if you like Black Sabbath or if you like our content, you should, good little video where I talk about their entire discography and some of the stuff outside their discography that some of the band members worked on that they didn't get to put under the Black Sabbath name technically. But Black Sabbath, after a while, they had a very fraught relationship with one another, and the various phases of the band and various different frontmen that replaced Ozzy, controversial stuff. Like, after Ozzy left, you had Dio, and that was a kind of a return to form and a new phase for the band with Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. And then you had people come in like, Ian Gillan, for instance, not the most popular guy, and, just a rotating, revolving door of unsuccessful attempts to kind of bring Black Sabbath back to their level of artistic success and their level of, artistic greatness. And it just they just didn't for a really long time. Like, 1981's Mob Rules is like kind of considered to be the point at which that's a great album. And then after that, like, they wouldn't make another album that Black Sabbath fans considered to be good until 1992's Dehumanizer. But that's not the album that I picked here. While I do think Dehumanizer is a good, if not great, album, I feel like what embodies the spirit of the comeback album is their 2013 album 13. Not just because this came after we pretty much assumed that Black Sabbath were done after 1995's Forbidden, kind of a low point both commercially and artistically for them. If not their worst album, then really goddamn close. But this is not just a band that came back together, but they came back together in a way that no one anticipated, that being the return of original frontman Ozzy Osbourne. All of the original members of Black Sabbath, sans him, stayed in the band for that long. Like, Tony Iommi has always been Black Sabbath's guitarist. Geezer Butler, always been the band's bassist, etc., etc. So when we get Ozzy back for 2013's 13, it's like, oh, is this even possible? Like, not only have they not made an album in like just eons at this point, it's like, is the old Black Sabbath formula even something that's still viable? Is Ozzy even going to mesh with the band? They've gone into so many different directions. I mean, arguably unsuccessful directions, but still various directions. And now we have this album. And yeah, everybody sees this, I think, pretty universally as a return to form for the band. But I honestly feel like it's also a good comeback album that's a little bit underrated by people, just because they tend to view it as, oh, this is a good one. But I think it's just kind of great. Not only do I think this contains the best Black Sabbath song, the closer on here, Dear Father, which to me is not just one of the most blood-pumping, exciting, and heavy Black Sabbath songs, it's also maybe the most emotionally poignant one, and incisive and acidic. And the rest of the album really isn't that far behind it, frankly. Great tracks on here. God is Dead, amazing song. Age of Reason, Zeitgeist, Live Forever, motherfucker, these songs are as good as the songs that they put out on albums in their heyday. And you know what? I even like this album a little bit more than I like some of the classic Dio Sabbath albums, just because you feel that sort of modern rock production really just adding to the muscle that this band never got to truly take advantage of. This is one of those instances where, you know, Rick Rubin, controversial producer in the world of rock music, but when the man is on, he's on, and he's one of the most famous rock producers for a reason, is because he can still do a damn good job at making albums hit hard. And he did a great job with this one on here. It's fundamentally, it's everything you could possibly want out of one of those original Sabbath albums. But again, that modern sheen goes a really long way. But the songwriting is still excellent. Ozzy still has it after, you know, 40 plus years of excessive drug use. I mean, he's up there with people like Mick Jagger in terms of like you should be dead. Like, there is no logical reason as to why Ozzy Osbourne is still alive somehow. Thank God that he is. He's a legend. I love him. I love that he's still making music and all that stuff, even though recently I guess he did kind of retire. But for his own health, God bless Ozzy. But still, this is just one of those albums that it really kind of reaffirms that sort of part of me that's always going to be super attached just to the idea of metal and rock music in like the more kind of fundamental boomery way that I feel like some people are just kind of inclined to be if they were grown and raised on rock music, because it gives you faith in it again. It's just like, oh, the spirit of this isn't dead. Like, it's still possible to come back and feel energized and vital and fun again. And that's why coming back to this has been particularly rewarding. As much as I liked this album when we talked about it or when I talked about it during my tier list, I think it's actually grown on me a tiny little bit. I don't think I would put it in any like a higher ranking necessarily, but I do like it a fair bit more just because it's such a tight, refined package.
I love a good tight refined package.
Heyo. Ooh.
You know, and on the note of Ruben, kind of ties in a little bit. Now, I want to do something of a bit of
Heyo.
a cheat with my second pick today, is that I'm kind of so with my three picks, I was like, I tried to channel albums from three completely different niches, right? First pick was hip hop, second pick indie rock, third pick popular music, right? But I just couldn't decide for my indie rock pick. Very typical of me. And I was tossing up between two records, one of which is absolutely more of a comeback in the sense of how it was received. Whereas for me, it was like, well, I always thought they were on a particularly consistent level. And for me, it wasn't that huge of a jump up. And the other one that was, I think, much more of a comeback to me personally, but also less well known in the public consciousness. So I'm going to go with both. Now, the more popular one is The Strokes, The New Abnormal. I think that is as good of a comeback record for an indie rock band as you could possibly envision, right? The Strokes had been in this circular arc, you know, for their career of like constantly trying to match the glory of Is This It? Every album they put out always compared to that record, always boxed them in, always kind of held them to the standard that was such an unfair way to treat the albums they put out. And I'm on the record. I like those later era records from the Strokes. The only Strokes record I don't really like is First Impressions of Earth. And even that has some songs on it I love. But Angles and Come Down Machine, I think those albums are pretty good. I think those albums are strong. I see it in our Random Access Memories video, hilariously enough. I took a chance to shout out Come Down Machine as an album that people have been bagging on in that year in 2013 that I thought was pretty solid. And every time I come back to that record, it holds up. I think that record is strong. But people hated it. People hated Angles. People hated First Impressions of Earth. People hated Come Down Machine. The Strokes were the butt of so many jokes that no one expected them to pull it out of the bag like they did with The New Abnormal, which was one of the most critically well-received albums of 2020, an album that's universally beloved, an album that got a lot of new, younger people into the Strokes in the first place, an album that feels like a complete anomaly in terms of like how uncool the Strokes were compared to how successful this album is, while not really changing or updating or modernizing the Strokes sound in many ways at all. I mean, it definitely sounds very slick. It's that Rick Rubin production, tying you back to Black Sabbath and many other albums. But To me, the new abnormal is like it's an album that's grown on me. I was a little bit like I was weirdly resentful of it when it came out because I was like, well, to me, the Strokes never really fell off, and you guys are just like overstating it. But as I've kind of gotten over that, I've come to really appreciate just how good the new abnormal is. But it's not that huge of a jump up for me to be like, yeah, comeback record. So I'm also sharing the slot with one that means a lot more to me personally, that being Jimmy Eat World's Integrity Blues, which came out in 2016, which was,
Right choice.
again, in terms of general critical consensus, yeah, it was well received, but Jimmy Eat World was so past anyone outside of their core fan base really caring about them that it didn't get a lot of press and a lot of attention. But those who were in the know knew that this was a significant step up for them, especially after how underwhelming 2013's frankly bad Damage was. I mean, that was just a complete failure for Jimmy World to kind of achieve any of the core things that make them compelling. And then Integrity Blues is such a vital reinvention. It's such a refreshing sound, a team up with Justin Meldal Johnson of M83 fame, and to make this glorious and slick and reinvigorated sound. I mean, they actually sound, it's not just that Integrity Blues is better than expected for Jimmy Eat World. It's that this is a fundamentally great album in general. Like, regardless of the band or the context, the songs on this are just stunning. Like the hugeness, the sound, but the songwriting is there as well. Jim Adkins is bringing everything to the table that he brought on some of those classic Jimmy records, and the album just is beautiful. I mean, Jimmy Eat World, one of my favorite bands, also one of my favorite bands to just take the whole discography and put it on shuffle. And every time a song from Integrity Blues comes up, it's like I get these specific dopamine receptors that get hit in my brain just because of the sound of it. It's just glorious and so beautiful. And yeah, I guess in similar but distinct ways, this new abnormal and Integrity Blues are these reinvigorations of an indie rock staple band, essentially, that didn't really change all that much for this reinvention, but just kind of figured out a way to find an energy and to capture people in a way that they hadn't for a really long time. And again, I think that records like Chase This Light and Invented are really underrated. I love those albums. So yeah, those two albums for me mean a lot in terms of bands not reclaiming past glories, but finding new success by feeling as though they belong in the current moment. And that's what those records do really, really well. So that's my cheat second pick for best comeback albums. Jake, what is your final pick today?
My final pick today is, I mean, it's interesting because the artist that I'm going with here is somebody who could feasibly have like 3 or 4 picks for comeback albums just because his career is so long. He has so many albums, so many phases, so many personas, so many sounds. And like, they're just, once you're a musician that has existed for long enough, these kind of ebbs and flows of cycles just inherently will yield moments where occasionally you will resurface and reemerge, and your fans will be like, they've still got it. And that being the one and only Bob Dylan. And I've gotten really into Bob Dylan's music over the past year, which is something that, again, probably should have happened much sooner in my life. But I mean, I've always loved Blood on the Tracks, but I have no excuse for not exploring his other records until now. But one that always sort of seemed interesting to me was Time Out of Mind, because that album is seen primarily, like, if you think of the idea of a comeback Bob Dylan album, Time Out of the Mind is usually the album that people go to first when they think about that, just because that was sort of a record that came after a particularly underwhelming string of records, and just at a point where I won't say people had totally lost faith in Bob Dylan, but like the narrative was just kind of beyond him. It wasn't that people lost faith in him, and if it was just that, like, oh, he's probably done now. Like, he'd been working in music at that point for like, what, 30 years? So I mean, like, if your last album is going to be like Under the Red Sky or something, yeah, people are just like, yeah, he probably didn't want to make music anymore. Who cares? But while I think that Time Out of Mind is a great album, I'm not picking Time Out of Mind. I'm picking his first collaboration with Daniel Lanois. My pick is 1989's Oh Mercy. Oh Mercy is interesting because I kind of feel like this album, if you're going to call like label some of his albums comeback albums, I feel like Oh Mercy is probably like that label fits it a little bit better, not only because it was after a particularly underwhelming string of records, but because I feel like Bob had his first like you can talk about like how he first did his more acoustically and sort of political music that he started out with, and then you have Electric Dylan, and that was really controversial at the time because they're like, oh, Dylan goes electric, he's a sellout, and then blah 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 blah. But like in hindsight, I think you can pretty much agree that like the first two or so decades of Bob Dylan's career is basically nothing but heat, like different varieties of heat, and it wasn't always considered that, to be sure, and there's one or two misses in there assuredly, but for the most part pretty great stuff. But then you kind of had that moment where he sort of fell out of favor with even critics, where he
Born again Christian era.
yeah, he had his born again Christian era, and people were like, oh, and he just started making albums that people really didn't care for, and just really just he lost touch with himself, I think. I mean, you can argue and say that he had an album like Infidels that was kind of sprinkled through in that run of particularly underwhelming records, but that's not an album that I feel like is good enough to sort of warrant being something that won back people's favor. So Oh Mercy is interesting because this is right before the advent of the 90s, and he teams up with Daniel Lanois to make this record. This is an album that just like from the outset you look at it and it doesn't look like a Bob Dylan album. I don't even mean like, from like the album art or whatever. You take a look at this and it's like it's 10 songs and it's less than 40 minutes. A Bob Dylan album? This man made Blonde on Blonde and the Basement Tapes, and he's like generally not afraid to let a record go on for a little bit. And then you listen to it and it's like a little bit more straightforwardly a rock and roll album than basically anything he's ever done. Rougher and more true to the spirit of rock and roll, but with the added polish of Daniel Lanois. And it adds an immediacy to Bob Dylan's sound that either hasn't been there since the very start of his career or arguably hasn't really ever been there before. Not in this way, anyway. The immediacy of the songwriting and the immediacy of the instrumentals behind them are something that feel almost like it's difficult to adjust to. When I first listened to this album, I was just kind of like, this is like, if it wasn't Bob Dylan singing this, then my God, I would never guess that this is him. Even the way that he writes it on here is a bit more, I don't want to say his writing is dumbed down because I don't believe that that's true, but I feel like it's very self-consciously more bass. It's a bit more direct and kind of angular in the way that he approaches it because, of course, Bob Dylan is, even when he's being straightforward, he's being weird. So when you have this album, it's sort of difficult to engage with at first just because it is so simple. I mean, almost one-dimensional when you listen to it at first. But then you listen to it in the context of his career, in the context of these songs overall, and it really does feel like he's capturing something about his artistic persona that has faded, that is long gone. He's writing this like Bob Dylan is a fascinating guy just because you can never really truly pin down what he's doing at a given moment because even he doesn't really know. Like you can watch all these documentaries, you can read about him endlessly. He's still somebody who's elusive. There's no way to fully embody him. You can listen to all of his albums. That's the core appeal of him as an artist, is that he's an enigma wrapped in a mystery inside Pandora's box. And that is ultimately what makes Oh Mercy such a compelling listen, is that he's sort of singing from the point of view of a character who is Bob Dylan being washed up. But doing that with this brighter, more immediate sound is something that makes for an album that is very mournful in a way that doesn't hit you at first. And then you listen to it again, and the standout moments on here really come to define and, again, contextualize everything else. This has not only my favorite Bob Dylan song, but one of my probably 10 favorite songs of all time. Most of the time, this song is devastating. I can't promise that any given person will listen to this and find it as emotional as I do, but as somebody who just goes back to this song very regularly, it breaks me apart. It's a very simple songwriting trick that he plays with on here. he's got the juice. He knows what he's doing, and it's something that you can't really verbalize until you actually hear it. But that Lanoy production is certainly something that gets a lot of mileage out of this. On something like Most of the Time, everything is so ethereal. All of the instruments have this incredible amount of body to them, but there's still a distinct subtlety on display here that is so tantalizing, hypnotic even, and it creates like this is basically a prototype for the sound that a lot of bands that we really love, like the War on Drugs, like that. This is the inception for that sound. Like if you like Lost in the Dream era War on Drugs, Oh Mercy by Bob Dylan is going to be like you're gonna fuck with this, I promise. And Most of the Time is exactly as impressionistic and as compelling as the best moments from a band like the War on Drugs. But that's not even the only highlight on here. This is an album that I love front to back. I think every song on here is great for one reason or another. Some reasons more complicated than others. This is an album that I feel like, while people do consider it a huge step up from what came before it, it fits all the criteria for a comeback album. It is the most underrated thing that I've heard from Bob. It's an album that deserves way more shine and deserves the amount of interrogation that the rest of his great records have.
Well, beautiful pick. And my last choice is a little bit unconventional, something from an artist that we haven't talked about before, one of the biggest artists of all time. And this came to me, one of the things I try to do with these Now episodes, I think it's a great chance to talk about artists that we love in a new context, or maybe shout something out that we haven't talked about before, or give a kind of slightly more concise overview of an aspect of an artist's career. But also sometimes these can be useful exercises to talk about an artist that we typically wouldn't get to talk about in any other context. We typically wouldn't review their new music, or they maybe don't put out new music all that often, and they maybe just don't fit into our wheelhouse all that much. So when thinking about best comeback albums, I stopped thinking about discographies and artists that I knew intimately in terms of their albums, and just started thinking about narratives. What are the comeback narratives I know? What are the big musical comeback narratives that I'm aware of? And part of this as well is my ongoing absolute adoration for Tom Bryan's number ones column on Stereo Gun, which he's been doing for several years now, where like 3 times a week he goes through he's going through the entire history of every single song that ever hit number one on the Billboard Hot 100 ever. And he's been doing this for several years now. He's currently in 2009 at the moment, but I've been following this column every week since pretty soon after it started, since I've been a subscriber of Stereo Gun for several years. And I think it's the best website for music on the internet. But anyway, this is all to say that these two things, my constant reading and adoration for Tom's number ones column, and my desire to kind of capture one of the great comeback narratives in music, helped me to kind of triangulate a perfect pick to finish this video on, which is an album that I suspected I would love because the big singles in this album I love. But just to kind of cement it, I went and listened to the album, and I was like, yeah, no, this is great. Front to back, fantastic. And really illustrates one of the most affirming comeback narratives in pop music history. All this is to say, my final pick today is Mariah Carey's The Emancipation of Mimi. Now, if you know anything about Mariah Carey, you'll know that she was huge in the 90s. She came through in the early 90s and had a very successful musical career. It wasn't without stumbling blocks. It wasn't without a huge amount of concerted effort and overcoming the typical industry trappings that kind of do swallow up a lot of artists. So it wasn't without a struggle for Mariah to get to the top, but once she got there, she was one of the biggest artists in the world, and she had many of the biggest singles of the 90s. And she famously flamed out with 2001's Glitter, the album and movie catastrophe.
Ooh.
Essentially, famously released on 9/11, and that's not even in the top 10 most tragic things about it. It just was a poorly conceived project altogether, and it wasn't something that saw Mariah achieve the success that she wanted. It was kind of, you know, and the thing is, especially this is especially true for women as well, who are particularly vulnerable to this idea of like the faded star, essentially, of like once you stop having immediate value, and once you stop producing hits, and once you stop producing something very consumable and very successful immediately, you know, you don't get leeway. Once it stops working, you know, the industry will swallow you up, and the industry will not give you another chance. And this is something that a lot of artists have fallen prey to, and it's been really, really unfortunate over the years, and it's a fundamental fact of the music industry's inherent misogyny. So when Mariah failed to make an impact with the follow-up to Glitter, 2002's Charm Bracelet, it became harder and harder to envision a situation where Mariah would be able to tunnel out of this and reclaim her spot on top again. But she proved everyone wrong with the emancipation of Mimi. From the incredible production across this album, from Jermaine Dupri, from the Neptunes, there's even a Kanye West production on this album, to the massive singles, particularly the song on this album, one of the great comeback songs of all time, We Belong Together, which every time I hear this song, I'm fucking blown away. You know, it's not an ostentatious song. It's not an extremely over-the-top song. I mean, Mariah is known for her vocal acrobatics and the fucking fireworks she can unleash. And yeah, she does go places with her voice on the song that only she could do. But it's not one of those songs that really grabs you and shakes you. It's just one of those songs that is so good and so powerful and so just completely undeniable in its beauty and its craft, that it single-handedly captured the world and put Mariah back on top again. And the rest of the album does not let up either. I mean, songs like Shake It Off, songs like Mine Again, songs like It's Like That, Circles, Your Girl, Fly Like a Bird. The album is stacked from front to back. It 100% has that 2000s, it has a very 2000s pop sound, a very kind of like, you know, it's a sound that you specifically associate with girls' bedrooms, and just this particular like aesthetic and feel of the 2000s that some who are less charitable might call dated. But to be honest, I don't think it sounds dated. I think it represents and encapsulates so much of the artistic heights of that era and of what made that whole era iconic and memorable, and what we associate with the 2000s. I mean, it's one of the greatest R&B records of the 2000s. It's one of the greatest pop records of the 2000s. It's one of the greatest soul records of the 2000s in its own way as well. And Mariah is just the beating heart, just completely elevating all of it, just pushing it through in her performances. She's credited as a co-producer for the bulk of this album as well. So it is 100% her vision in every respect. Now, not every single song is great. I mean, the Nelly song on this, To the Floor, is a bit regrettable, but like the album is consistent and front to back flooring enough to be, in my opinion, a capital G great album. And it is one of the most undeniable comeback arcs ever, because not only did Mariah come back, you know, being one of the most successful solo artists of the 90s and having that downfall, not only did she came back stronger than ever before. And she's elevated herself to a position now where she reliably has a #1 song every single year in December, just because of what she's been able to do. So, you know, and apart from, you know, the widely generally consensus agreement that she has one of the most impressive voices of all time, she is just also a personality who is unstoppable.
I love how she's leaned into the meme of the Christmas thing. Like she's really played that up in a really, like, it would be so easy to find a song that overexposed annoying and the personality like playing that up to be annoying, but she does it in a way that's just undeniably kind of badass.
Yeah,
She's like, yeah, I'm here to stay.
absolutely. And she knows the power that she has, and she knows how undeniable her performance, her skill, her technical ability is, as well as her class, her style, her looks. Everything that she brings is just, it's hard to imagine someone dissing Mariah Carey, right? You could occasionally point at some of her, you know, goofier elements, and sometimes
Unless you're Whitney Houston.
Well, that's like, that's between them. You know, that's not for me to comment.
Hey, without that little feud, we wouldn't have I don't know her. And where would we be as a society without that?
Which that is like the embodiment of class and charm and disdain.
I would just like to point out that it means something that her image was so confident on albums like this, just because, like, look at the album cover to Charm Bracelet. I have never in my life seen a photograph that more screams, I am at my high school yearbook graduation photo and I want to leave right now. Just
Even at her least perfect and brilliant looks, she's still serving something, and you still can't really
a little
deny
bit.
her. I mean, I don't know what's going on the cover of Rainbow with the spray
Wait, let
painted
me see.
rainbow that she's kind of like she's
Oh,
standing in front of a door, and someone's spray painting a window over the door, but she's in the way, so like it gets on her, and it's a little bit messy. Not quite.
there's enough like oil on her body for like Bush to invade. Like, my God.
And look, and she also like has these. She can always be counted on to deliver these like incredibly ostentatious and ridiculously goofy album titles, like E equals MC squared, Memoirs of an Imperfect Angel, and the greatest album title of all time, Me, I Am Mariah, the Elusive Chanteuse, which every opportunity I get to say that album title, I'm never gonna miss it because it's a fucking glorious.
Actually it has the fucking ellipses in it. I'm fucking dead. Oh my God.
It has a fucking full stop and an ellipsis in the title. Like you
Me,
can't that
I Am Mariah, the elusive. I accidentally read that at first as the elusive creature.
no. The Elusive Chanteuse. What the fuck is that?
I'm gonna be real with you. I don't know what chanteuse is.
It's I don't want to know. I'm not even
It's-
gonna look it up. It's fine.
I'm gonna search Google for it.
Yeah.
A female singer of popular songs. Oh, well, that's that's just very literal. I thought this was gonna be like a duchess or something.
The funniest thing about that though is not that. It's not even chanteuse. It's elusive. Like on what level is Mariah elusive? You hear her fucking song.
You are the opposite of elusive. You're ubiquitous.
Yeah. But you know what? Go off, right? And she had
yeah.
And she had another kind of like critical comeback as well in 2018 with Caution, which everyone fucking loved.
Oh yeah.
So like Mariah, you can never count her out. She's never far from the top, and she is, she's iconic. She's incredible.
Sure.
Anyway, so that's where I'm finishing up today. Take it or leave it. That's our picks for the best musical comeback albums. But let us know what your thoughts are. Let us know what your picks are at home. What you would suggest, what you would select for great comeback albums. Not just albums where the artist was always great but took a break and then came back and continued being great, but albums where the artist had to prove themselves again and did that with an album that holds up with their best work. Let us know your picks in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode of Jams and Tea Now, please consider giving us a like and subscribing if you haven't already. Both of those things help us out an awful lot. Thank you to all our new subscribers as well. We just hit 6,000, so it's fucking crazy over here right now. Really enjoying and grateful for the attention, and hopefully that you'll stick around and listen to what we have to say and share what you think as well, because this doesn't work without you. So if you want to go above and beyond and support us directly for just $1 a month, you can hit the join button, become a member of the Jams and Tea family, get your name in the title crawl of every video on this channel. Plus, if you want to recommend us some music to talk about on the channel, your recommendation will go to the top of the pile. Until next time, though, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, De Beers, a diamond is forever.